สวัสดีครับท่านสมาชิกนะครับกลับมาอีกครั้งนะครับกับDirectors Briefing ของ IOD นะครับผมกุลเวช เจนวัฒนาวิทย์นะครับ CEO ของ IOD ครับวันนี้นะครับเราได้รับเกียรติจากทาง McKinsey นะครับจะมาพูดถึงเรื่องของ Innovating from Necessity นะครับ Digital Business Building Imperative in the Current Crisis นะครับก่อนที่จะไปตัวดีเทลมากไปกว่านี้นะครับผมขออนุญาตพูดเป็นภาษาอังกฤษนะครับเพราะว่าวันนี้เนี่ยมีสปีกเกอร์ที่เป็นคนที่ไม่ใช่คนไทยด้วยนะครับGood morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to turn this into an English session now. Before we start, please be informed that the operation during the activities that you are on, you will be asked to be on mute. But feel free to send us some questions. Just go to chat and send your question to all panelists. Okay. Now, today we have two speakers from McKinsey's, one in Singapore and one in Bangkok. May I introduce Mr. Dilip Mistry, partner of McKinsey and Company Singapore. Swadee Krab, Kun Dilip. And also Kunพิภาวินหรือว่าคุณแจนนะครับโสดประเสริฐนะครับshe's a partner of McKinsey and Company in Bangkok office สวัสดีครับคุณแจนครับ
สวัสดีค่ะ
Oh thank you very much for both for spend your time with us today and this is a very interesting topic because we are saying that we need to do something as the crisis, the COVID, and also before that, the disruption hit most of the business. We need to survive, but at the same time, we have to build a new S-curve. So I like the topic that is almost like how to build a new S-curve from necessity. Okay, so I understand that you have some PowerPoint presentation, right? And I understand that we will divide this into 4 parts. The first part will be about why we talk about this, what's a dilemma. The second part will be on how to build digital business. And the third one would be the most important one, which is what's the choice for the boardroom and for the corporate. And the fourth one is the conclusion, which is the lesson learned for the board of directors. So without further ado, please, Kun Jan, do you want to start with the first session?
Sure. Thank you, Kun Gulawen. Today, right, we would like to maybe start by the dilemma that we see in the market right now. So if you could go to the next page. If you look at the S&P index, the average life of the life of the company, right? Back in the 50s, right, in the like 1958, when we look at the average lifespan of the S&P company on the S&P index, on average, the age of the company is about 60 years, right? But these days, given the change in the like the digital technology and everything, especially the recent COVID, I guess. Like even back in 2018, we start to see that the average age of like the lifespan of the company on S&P index has changed dramatically. Now it's only about 22, right? Primarily that you see like in the old days, right? The big company are the large conglomerate, like corporate, like the oil company, the bank institutions. But these days, if you look on the S&P index, right, all like the new big guys, it's actually going to be all like the tech company. Technology is really changing all of us, right? The day even like the internet and the mobile and the cloud is definitely like everyone has to use it. But going forward, right, there's a lot of talk about the machine learning, quantum computing, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, like IoT, blockchain. These are like what's happening here and now. And what would be next, right? No one know what, no one can predict. The customer itself, I think from the COVID, is also very showing like the shift in the behavior very significantly, which impact on the channel's preference. These days, everyone is on their mobile phones, right? I'm pretty sure even on this call itself, a lot of you already touching the mobile phone, right? The product utility like that, it has to be very easy to use. People don't have more like a lot of loyalty, right? They're only gonna respond to whatever they solve their pain point. In terms of the capital, you see all the money, like all the VC funding, everything they would pour into like the startup, the business deals, right? Or even on the competitors, there are different like the sectors are really blurring, right? Like people are doing everything that's to make sure that they can serve the customers. So with all these changes, it's very difficult for like the corporate to like how do we be more nimble, more agile to really adopt this digital. Like not that the corporate doesn't know, they also know, but how do they adapt and try to keep up with the change? So if we go to the next page, right? What we see is like, yes, everyone try to know like this is a new thing, very like we need to do the digital business, but it's not easy, right? So like we saw like, even though like, oh, now it's a Facebook or Line or Google, but how many attempts has been there before you find one Facebook, right? What we found on the Fortune 100 since 2000, right? Like the new business build that is like a blockbuster success is maybe not, it's about only 16%, right? Other like either at best you might be able to call them that is partially success. And the reason is that that's a couple of reasons, right? The first one is because it's like there is no unfair advantage, because when you have like a startup, then you don't have anything to leverage from. Or like when the corporate start to do this, they don't know how to leverage from their own core assets. So it's very tough, right? At the same time, the second one is slow starvation. Because even though like they might have a brilliant ideas, but then like this startup or like when they try to build a new business, they don't get the right capital, or like they don't have the investment, the right talent to help push the idea forward. If they are really working with the corporate, right, a lot of the time is the misaligned expectation, because like the culture and it's very different, right? So like as a large corporate, usually they would be really focusing on the short-term profitability or like protecting their legacy business. For them to try like a new thing is also very tough, right? And if it's in the corporate, usually it's got dragged down by the bureaucracy, right? All these startups, that's why we saw a lot of new startups like just try to go on their own, because like once they go into the corporate world, they feel dragged down by the bureaucracy, right? Like or just the procurement itself can just kill the whole thing, right? And at the same time, even though like you have this new startup that's funded by the corporate, but then after they have some early success, maybe the mothership feel like, hey, you are competing with my new business, right? So then like they just want to come back and try to compete back the business itself. And last but not least, it's really like the mindset and the culture between the two, like people who work in the corporate life and really like the startup and digital is very different, right? So you might also see a lot of like the talent leak, the brain leak to the new business. So this is also the dilemma when the corporates start to try to do the digital business, that at the end it results in most of them is not really succeeding, right? So I guess this is like bring me to the last page for the first section, is that what would be the best ideal for on this dilemma is like if we can combine the best of both worlds, right? The aspiration here is to get this unfair advantage in this flexibility and agile environment of the startup. So then if you have this right marriage between the two, with the large corporate have the strength of an incumbent where you get the money, the distribution, and the clients, then like you can also some way somehow set up or like approach to build this new business that can really have the flexibility and the speed of a startup. So that would be the ideal case that people are strive for. Yeah, so that would be what I would want to leave you with, and then Dilip can go into the detail of how to build the new digital business.
Thank you, Kun Jan. That sounds very eye-opening. We say that the shorter lifespan of companies is, it used to be 61 year, and now it's 22 years, and maybe 10 years from now, it might be even less than that. So that's a challenge for the company and the boardroom too. And there are two different culture of the old world corporate and the new world, the startup. And the way we say that the way to prolong your or expand your lifespan is to make your company more digital, to expand, right? But the challenge is that the culture and over a new world. What can you give us some example of the company out there who could bridge this gap?
Very like I think there are different attempts that been done, right? So we will cover in the later part like different choices that they do.
Okay.
But for example, right, a lot of the thing you would see that either they would have like an arm to like really build like the startup themselves, or like they would be going. This is just a like an appetizer before the main course later, right? Would be set up like a new JV or partnership, right? There are different ways to do it, but the one that really success, I think is a handful. I don't know, Dilip, you want to, in your experience, any company that you would think that they have done a good balance for that?
Yeah, look, I think in my experience, there are many companies which are trying multiple times. I mean, to give an example, a very traditional company, in my home country, UK, there are leading companies like BP, large oil and gas company, and even an old institution like Lloyd's of London. Both those organizations I know have had 2 or 3 attempts to build new businesses. I mean, they've tried all of the options that Kunyan will cover later.
Yep.
And the big
Okay.
learning to bridge the culture is to get a mix of new people as well as some of the traditional people as well. That's my big learning so far. If you try and do it all with old people, it will not work. If you try it with just new people, it will not work. You have to get this right mix, and that really is the secret here.
The one that
Okay.
come to mind for me, I like Ping An from China, right? It's a large insurance company, but they already have really tried to pivot to do more like of this technology, more like digital platform. So that one, I would take it as a good example. The recent one that is really hot is from India, right? The Reliance Jio. That one, don't know whether it's like, but it's definitely gaining a lot of attention. Despite this COVID time, they attract like a big investment from all the large PE firm as well as Facebook to take a stake in this new digital business that they just built. So
Okay. Thank you.
so that is hope. I would just say that there is hope. Not much, but there's hope.
Okay. And so, Kun Dilip, do you want to go for the second part, how to build digital
Sure.
business? I think maybe I have spoiled that by asking the question a little bit too soon. Sorry about that. Yep.
No, it's okay because we get asked the question all the time, what is the secret sauce and how do you go about doing this? And so if we go to the next page, basically, I think, it's important to realize, look, first and foremost, I just want to say in terms of building any business, many of the attendees will know how to build businesses. You've done that for most of your life. And you obviously, as directors, providing the governance and oversight that's required and make sure companies are not taking too many risks, etc., etc. So what is different about digital business is the velocity, the speed at which certain things are being done, and all the technologies that Jan talked about, and there'll be more, there'll be new technologies as well. That'll just continue. That'll just become a normal way of life. And it won't be anything exciting, I mean, like today, we are in COVID, we are now doing all this virtual work, yeah? Or we're not meeting people face to face as much in certain parts of the world, and business is being done virtually. And then people are talking about this being the new normal. So similarly, there are so many other digital things which we talk about today, which will just become the normal way of doing things. And and these key phases of building a business are things which I want everyone to be aware of. So, in building a new business, as an IOD, you know, is your organization looking at a portfolio of ideas, you know, and some might be related to the core business, some might be different, but how do you go about ideating these ideas? And then, there's a phase which we call planning. Now, you might say, yeah, there's always planning, but you don't want to overdo planning. In the old days, you might have taken, 3 months, 6 months to come up with a very thick business plan and make sure there's no change. The reality in a digital business is there is always change, and you always need to be able to be flexible enough. So you build a plan which you de-risk as much as possible, but then you go for it, but you're willing to kind of revisit the planning effort. Yeah? The third thing, which is around actually building it. What's interesting, guys, is that the barriers to entry to build a new business, especially a digital business, are low. Jan mentioned the cloud. If I go back to when I started my career 30 years ago, if I was to start a business and I needed technology, it would be a 2 3 month exercise to get access to the technology, to get access to the skills, to set it up even before I think about what I'm building. These days, what do? I swipe my credit card, and within 10 minutes, I have a cloud infrastructure up and running. I have my line of business systems up and running. It is so fast, and so that's encouraging more and more people to enter this space. And that's from a technology point of view. The same is true from a marketing point of view as well, because of all the digital marketing channels that are out now. And the most important thing is grow. The reason why I mention grow is there are so many companies which get into the build phase but are never able to hit the S curve. And so, many organizations are in what we call the MVP graveyard. And so, lots of data sites, lots of trials, but very few people actually scale. And this is something as a BOD, I would really encourage you to ask your organizations that start new business, and that is, you know, yes, you're building this, but how do you plan to grow 10x, 20x, 30x, and why are you convinced that there's a willingness to pay to do this? And finally, like any startup, you have an exit in mind. And that's a big thing about startups. They always think about exit. So let's just spend a minute on a few of these, and then we can discuss. So let's start with ideate very quickly. What's the best way of getting the companies of which you are a director to get them to think about ideas? Where do these ideas come from? And then the reality is there are many different tools available to help organizations think about coming up with new ideas. So obviously you could focus on problem areas. Obviously you can look at what competition is doing. Obviously you can look at what others are doing around the world, but you find a problem. And then you follow a structured way of focusing on the problem, sizing the problem, getting to different solutions, and then basically putting a pitch together. Um, Now, one of the tools which exists to help you come up with ideas is to kind of partner with different types of organizations. And Kunyan will talk about how you might want to partner with accelerators, for example, to help you come up with ideas. But the most important thing I want to say here is that the best ideas are probably not from your management teams. And you might say, wow, the best ideas in my experience actually come from the people on the ground. Okay, the people that are closest to the customer. So the one big piece of advice I would give to IOD members is whenever any management team provides an idea of a business they want to start, the first question you should always ask is, where is the customer tested? Have you sat in the customer's shoes? Do you really understand the pain points? Because that for me is the real test beyond any fancy plan. Okay, so you get really close to the customer, number one. Then in terms of planning, once again, you need to build a financial plan, obviously. You also need to build a technology plan. You also need to build a marketing plan. but you also need to, embrace, once again, the success of a business is how a customer thinks. And so compared to businesses in the past, you have new types of people that you need to have in your business planning team. People like product managers, which many digital companies do, many traditional companies don't do. People like designers, which we historically may not have thought of them, but they are critical part of business building because they will build digital experiences. If your experience is not comparable to other experiences on the mobile device, they're going to drop you. Remember, you're just one of 44, 45 icons on somebody's phone. And if your business isn't have an experience similar to a Google or a Facebook, people are not going to click on your experience. So design thinking is something you really need to embrace as part of planning the experience for your new business. Go to the next page very quickly. And then this is the meat. What are you actually building? And in my experience, too many people focus on kind of product and technology. They're important. I want to be very clear. They are critical because what's a business without the actual product? Equally important, as I mentioned earlier, is the growth mindset. People sometimes refer to them not as marketeers anymore. People refer to them as growth hackers. Fancy term. And what this growth hacker means is that your marketing department is now using data and analytics and experiments to every week get momentum to try and get people to hopefully use your product and then hopefully pay and transact with you as well. So besides technology, product, and kind of growth hacking, the remaining three are also important. And as a BOD, you need to make sure that they're getting the right operations discipline in place, but not you don't want to overdo it. This is my big advice for a small startup. If you overdo process, if you do overdo governance in the first few months, you'll kill them because they're spending way too much on internal focus as opposed to getting focused on validating the product in the first place. So as a BOD, you need to figure that balance out, and it will vary from organization to organization. Number 5, building people. It's all about people. And as a BOD, you need to make sure, do I have the right leadership team in place? By the way, who will be willing to make change? If you ask any VC when they are betting on a startup, what do they look for? They don't. The idea doesn't matter. Ideas are a dime a dozen. They come and go. But what they really focus on is the management team and the leadership team willing to adapt and change. It's the same for BOD when looking at the team that is building a new business. And finally, capital. Of course, capital is important. And my big ask here is that the new digital business, has funding in place, but not too much funding. One of the biggest mistakes I've seen is leadership teams sign up for 1-2 year funding for this business, and you know what? That gives them the wrong sense of you want to give them funding, you want to be frugal, and the most important thing is stage gated. So you like the idea, but you say, look, I will release X amount of money for the next 3 months if you can hit these milestones. And then this way, it keeps them hungry, keeps them focused. And this really is the secret ingredient of a lot of startups. The right people, highly motivated, and given the right amount of capital, not too much capital. Otherwise, they can become a bit complacent in my experience. So after build, and just last slide, last page for me. Next page, Alex. Oh, sorry, go back a second. On building, the other thing I want to mention is you build in a different way. So once again, businesses in the past, you'd have planned everything, you'd have built everything. 1-2 year later, you then release the product, and then you find whether it works or not. In the digital product, especially digital experiences, you have this concept called an MVP, minimum viable product. Some people say MLP, minimal lovable product. But the point is you release a product early and it has just the key functionality, the most important functionality, and you get it out in front of the customer. And the reason why this is important is you can validate, whether your idea is right or wrong. And you go through this cycle of, building, You basically want to release early, and you learn from it as well. So you build in iteration. And some of you may ask, how can you do that? How can you release a digital product or an experience before it's ready? Won't that affect my brand? But think about all the digital products around the world. If you think about the Facebooks, the Googles, the Microsofts, even banks, you know, consumers are now used to updating their phone, their TV, their tablet, and with every week new releases come out. In fact, they expect it. And so, as long as your version 1 is good enough to provide value, and they get some benefit, they will be willing to accept that minimum experience, as long as you have the ability to keep updating it. And this is the one thing the board of directors need to look. Are we behaving in a new way? Are we working in an agile mindset? Are we listening to the customer? Because that's the only thing that's going to determine success for your product. I think this is the last page, I think. Next one. Or have I lost track, Alan? Yeah, just two things on growth. If I was hiring a growth team, I would make sure you've got someone who is both marketing mindset, can think creatively, knows how to speak the customer voice, but also has a technology background. You cannot do marketing for a digital company without understanding technology. And the specific technology is MarTech, marketing technology. And so you need to make sure that you've got people that can use that, and you've got people who are really focused on the data. So you grow by hacking your way, by using data to kind of scale your growth. And then on the right-hand side, and we can spend more time on this if you want, but basically these are the phases and how long it takes. So to come up with ideas and planning, you can come up with an idea in a couple of weeks. The planning will take 8 to 12 weeks to do it properly, but then your build is typically 6 to 12 months minimum, for you to start getting momentum. Scaling can take a while, a year or two, and then you look towards an exit. Now this timeline will vary from business to business, but the important thing is, you're talking 2-3 year timeline at least to get momentum for most digital businesses. So that's the process. What's the next page? Oh, I think that is the last page. Yes, Kun. So that's the process of how you go about building it.
Okay. Thank you, Kun Dilip. In the interest of time, I'll be summarizing a bit, and then we could jump into the next part. Okay.
Please.
So we talk about. I like your word, growth hacker. Never heard of this before. And then the best idea always come from the people on the ground who understand the customer's pain point. So that is extremely true. And so it's about, and this growth hacker has a product and strategy, go-to-market and growth, operation, building leadership and people, and lastly, capital, right? And then I guess what you're trying to say for the whole thing, and it comes back to your first part, which is about customer, is that customer right now, their expectation on your product might have changed. You don't have to launch something that is perfect on the first day. They're willing to try and then learn from you and your new version, your new update. But so it sounds like a journey more than one shot thing.
Absolutely.
Okay. So part 3. So now that we know, what could a company or what could a boardroom understand as a choice for us to expand?
Okay, thank you. So I guess the previous part that Dilip go over, I would call that is the substance, really like how do you build a new digital business, right? But I think at the board level, the form is also quite important as well, like how the corporate choose to build this new business. We put it into spectrum, right? From we have like number 1, we call the venture builders, then go over to the more like the accelerator, incubator, to JV partnership, to M&A and corporate VC. So this spectrum actually is around, like I feel it's more like about the control, the level of control you have at the board level. So if you go all the way to the right hand side, the corporate VC, right? This is more like, it's more like the investment kind of mindset, right? Dilip already mentioned that you look for really like a founder, like or this really strong like individuals, right, or a team that have this inspiration, and you feel like they really would be someone who would pull it through. So that is the most important for a VC when you look for the investment. Then like they have like these good ideas. So that is how you usually what the corporate could do on this case is that you set up this corporate CVC, corporate venture capital. So then they can really have this professional team who would be able to identify all these really brilliant individuals or the founders who can really make a difference, right? And you believe that they could, like this investment, this business would grow into become some big thing, right? So like the big name that I guess everyone should have heard of is like the SoftBank, Mr. Masahiro, right? Everyone would have heard about him, that he would be like having this 1-2 billion like that of fund that then he would deploy to invest in like the like of this new like the startup who become big right now, right? The Grab or like the Uber of the world, right? So that is more like, so then it's really the approach is like it's using the investment mindset, right? Like that, able to really identify who are the likely individual or like this team who could really bring the change in the digital business, and let them really adopt what Dilip just said earlier. Like they would follow those steps and making sure that they deliver the good product, capture to the right consumers and grow, right? Then we shift back, like it come closer and closer to the main like mothership, right? In a way. So M&A, this is more like you just acquire. You see like, oh, this is like a good new S-curve business that would grow. So then you say like, well, it might be more related business for me. So then why don't I just invest in them and like do like merger acquisition, right? To bring this new capability back to myself. I think not quite sure, one of like the Singapore Post here, like then you can invest in some logistic capabilities, right? That you could do. Then you bring it closer and closer to home. Like the JV partnership is actually a lot of the people adopt this, right? We did a similar session with the TRCA earlier this year, and where we also conduct a poll. And from the room, actually the most kind of the preferred choice, it seems, for the participant was going JV partnership. I think this one is more like the large corporate, right? Because you know that this startup or like the digital kind of technology tech company approach is quite new. Then you actually do a partnership, right? So then you set up like this new JV that is like the team from the corporate and also like with this tech giant, and then partner and try to build a new culture, new company. In this case, then I think a lot of people feel more comforted that you work with someone who have been there, done that before, right? And then it's a good business model that you like, and then so hopefully you can replicate that success in Thailand. So the example here we put is, for example, like what Central has partnered with JD to become the JD Central in Thailand, right? Grab also with KBank and also the Rapid Line Pay, for example, right? So these are like and Lineman. I think that the latest one we just heard in the market is like kind of Wong Nai, right? Is partner up with the with Line to do the Lineman. So these are like some of like the different type of like JV partnerships. So then you can really bring, hopefully like from the large corporate also can partner with like this tech native. So then you can do like a new digital business that is have the mix of both worlds. Then you see like B is around like the accelerator and the venture builders. Actually, I have a page, right? So maybe we can go to the next page for the venture builder. Yeah. So this is really to think about like the original idea about like how to capture the unfair advantage, why you still have this the speed and agility of the startup, right? So sorry, Kun Kulavit, if you don't mind going on mute. Thank you. Okay, yes. So this is where like usually what happened for the venture builders, right? If there is like this new business concept, right, that we think it is a good idea, but then what is blocking the big corporate to adopt this new digital business quickly is could be that they have this legacy, right? Like that they have like existing customer or like the IT system. Like you used to have all these big, large core banking system, for example, right? It's very difficult for you to be able to be as agile and having the speed and the skill that the startup would have. So what happened is that if that the in the ideal world would be like you bring like the strength of the corporate, which is like the unparalleled advantage, where you already have the customers, right? You have the network, you have the business relationship with a lot of the suppliers. So you can use that to really help to build like the new business, right? Like instead of acquiring all the new customers, then you can say like this new service, the business concept, you can serve it to your existing customers. But then instead of having to use the existing or dealing with the legacy IT system, the governance, like the 3 layers of procurement to even buy like a new server to set up your system, right? Then you check that out and then set up like a dedicated team. Could be within the corporate itself, or you set up like as a new entity, right? But then give them really a space to operate, right? With a new, more like a startup operation. Then that they can apply like the speed. The other one is quite important that you would be able to attract like the skill or the talent who has been like a lot of like the good talent in the startup world, right, would be fear. They would fear to just come and work in the corporate because they don't want to be dragged down by the bureaucratic, right? So then at least you show that there is like this dedicated unit or even like a standalone business that would like is carved out very clearly. So then you can able to attract this talent in. And then with the agility of the startup, like minus the legacy of like the corporate, right? But then you have tapped to the strength of the corporate, be it the customers, the capital, or like this kind of the business network that they already have. Then you would be able to scale your business much faster, and the chance of success is a lot higher. So this is one concept around the venture builders. The example we saw is, for example, BP Launchpad, right? That Dilip mentioned earlier, that they actually carve out like a unit, almost like a separate entity to be like, they have like a new ideas on like the energy. And then these are like the different project that they start to scale and build internally. And then later on, once it's grown, then they actually spin off to grow as a bigger company. Another thing that is quite important that I like to mention here is having this carve out unit or dedicated company. It helps to also communicate with the market, because like the tech company, the multiples or like the valuation is very different, right? If you're thinking still about like, oh, it's part of your company, then like all the numbers, because the early years would be the investment, it would be hitting your bottom line and become a loss. Then you would say like, oh, this is not like profitable. But actually, when you become spin it out and then see it as an independent company, then you do the valuation using the technology company mindset. Then you look at the number of customer base, right, and the revenue, the top line. Then you are able to fetch a lot better multiples than having it inside the company. And I think that is one of like really you can also manage the risk, right, or the exposure. This come back to what Dilip said earlier, right? Give them a bit enough sufficient funding to grow, but not too much, and always have this stage gate kind of mindset, right? You hit these deliverables, these operating metrics, then you get the next round of funding. So that kind of culture and mindset would help to like increase the chance of success for this digital business building as well. Okay. Next, we talk a little bit around like the accelerators, right? So this is like coming a little bit further away from doing almost on your own. But this one is, so like there are a lot of these kind of accelerator programs around the world. So then at least this one, not, then you would have sort of like a coach or like a school. So this one is example from Equinor that partner with Techstars, right? So they have this accelerator program. So then you would be able to identify all these young startups or like the founder with good ideas, but then you put them into like a structured program, right? Then you can also cultivate and coach them, right? How do you actually grow the business? Like what, like at the beginning to like how to do like the how to do at the traction phase, how to do the storytelling. Because a lot of there are quite a good like number of people with good ideas, right? But doing this startup or like new digital business building is quite new to them. So at least having like going through all this like the coaching or the program, so then they understand the process, right? There might be a very good founder or the product owner that we call, right? Because they have a very good product ideas. But a lot of the guys are like, if it's really a technology person, to communicate, to really convince the investors, and it's very different skills, right? Like the technicians, right? And the business guy is very different, right? This kind of program help kind of groom like the different skill set, as well as because like they've been around, they also have connections, right? They are in the network, they know other like-minded people that you can help to assemble to even become a good team. So this is like kind of having an accelerator to help coach and groom like you see a budding talent that okay that just need a little bit of push. So then you say like putting them in this kind of program, getting them ready before they can really build and start their own business. That would benefit to the corporate. And the last one, which I guess the last one that we would go a little bit more in depth is around the strategic partnership, right? The JV that I covered earlier. So the idea was quite similar, but then this one is like it's not only about like the individual, but it's more like with the corporate with like usually it's larger digital native, right? So that you can do this partnership, like it's going to be a combined team that you set up in a different entity as a JV. So then they have like the common objective, right? To, for example, JD Central is like to grow like the e-commerce, right? For like, because JD is from China, then Central have like this big franchise in Thailand. So then it's really a match, good partnership that JD come and partner with Central to set up this new e-commerce business in Thailand, right? To capture this more like the online consumer. So then with that kind of like, so then hoping that they can really leverage the corporate strength of Central in Thailand and then the tech capability for JD, and who has really done and be the big e-commerce player in China themselves. So then to work together and really change the face of the online marketplace e-commerce for Thailand. So that is like the third option, which from it seems like a lot of like in Thailand, the large corporate are a lot more comfortable with this this structure that we have seen. So that's why you see JD Central, the Rapid partner, the BTS partnership with the Line, right? And then also the Grab and KBank, for example. Yeah, so these are like the three different, or actually total is 5. But I guess like if you really want to be kind of have a better control or like more involvement on the business building, then like a lot of people would be A, B, and C. That is more involvement from the corporate. Yeah.
Okay. So there were, thank you, Kun Chan. So there were 5 approach, but we just emphasize on 3, right? So,
Correct.
and so ranging from do it yourself, which is venture building, right? That one you build yourself, right?
Yes.
Into incubating, coaching them, accelerate them, right?
Yeah.
Into another the last one is JV.
Correct.
Partner, right?
If you look at the spectrum, right, the left-hand side is like where you primarily do it yourself, and then in the middle, you start to partner with someone, the level of partnership going stronger, and going to the right is like, let them do it, right? I'm just the investor, right? Yeah.
So the first one is do it yourself. The second one is partner with smaller young stars. Okay, and the last one is partner with someone who probably the same size as you and some like that. And some company, as far as I can see, like KBank, they would do 2 or 3 approach at the same time, right? So they,
Yes.
as you said, they are working with Grab, but at the same time, and that is JV, right? But at the same time, they are doing incubating, and probably they have their own venture builder also, right?
Thank you, Khun Gulavid. I forgot to mention that. Yes, usually the corporate try a few things, right? And these are not mutually exclusive, right? So you can try a few things, and also over time, right? Maybe you start with like accelerator, then it doesn't fit your culture, you don't see a lot of success, and then some people also shift to do different things as well. So these are just like different form, as I mentioned, right? That you can approach a business building, and a lot of the company could also do both together. Sometimes, yeah.
I guess one of the advantage of doing the JV is that you stop one big company from disrupting your own business by becoming a joint venture with them, right?
True. The other way you think about this is like, well, turning the competitors become your
Exactly.
allies, right? Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Dilip, do you want to add anything before we move on to the last part?
Yeah, I think the only thing is, look, on the left hand side. I mean, you're in control, as Ian mentioned, but I think the thing which a BOD needs to remember is culture. Yeah, it's when 2 or more parties come together, it either fits or there's rubbing. And I think one of the things which is hard to measure is there a cultural fit? And that's what I would look for. So, although the JV idea is very practical and there's many strategic reasons for doing that, if the management culture and the culture of those organizations cannot gel, you're probably going to have to do a write-off in the long run. But if there is a good gelling and the values are aligned and the vision is aligned, then it can work. So that's the only thing I would like to ask the BODs to think about. Yes, logic it makes sense, business makes sense, but can these guys get on? Is the thing to check for, and you might need to think about ways of doing that.
Thank you, Khun Dilip. Talking about culture, I can clearly see right now, like for example, banking industry is highly regulated. So the culture is very much risk driven, risk averse. So they might have to set up another entity to make sure that the culture is not the same.
And Dilip is super right? It's like the JV part is actually not easy. Imagine someone from a tech background and the other from like a large corporate, right? Like I'm in a few boardroom of those, and it's quite interesting to see like very different mindset, right? So, and another point that Dilip mentioned, even though for the venture builder you do it alone, but I think it's important for the board to really still maintain the board and the management team kind of like the distance, right? Like when I say like you have more control, it means you are not having to have the headache of the partners, right? But you need to give the management the room for them to operate, and then you act as a board, right? Then you kind of check on them every half year or every quarter, right? And not being the one who go in and say like, we need to do 1, 2, 3, 4. That's not the role of the board. Yeah.
Stay away. Okay, so the last part will be about the lessons for the board of directors. So who want to start with that?
I'll start with that. And I think if we go to the next page, I think some of these lessons, I think, I think we've touched upon a few of them, so I won't repeat. But number one, when any company is trying to build a new business, and when the BOD is looking at who's going to build the business, the team is the most important thing. Yeah, and make no compromise. You absolutely need a class team. And as I mentioned earlier, in my experience, having done this a few times with many large organizations, you want a mix of old and the new. There are some key positions like chief product officer, chief technology officer, chief experience officer, which you might get from the new world, There might be a few other roles which you could get from the old world, from the incumbent. And if you can get this team to work together, they can work really well. As I mentioned earlier, you want to avoid a completely new team as well, because if you have a completely new team and they don't know how to work with the corporate, that can be clashing as well. So this is why the team is really important. The second thing is something which the board will definitely need to review, and that is the compensation structure and the incentive structure for this new leadership team. Frankly, to get top talent and to get the best in the marketplace to help your company build a new fast-growing business, the people you attract will not work for salary. They work for upside. And so you need to figure out what are the different mechanics that you can put in place so you incentivize them for long-term and hockey stick growth. And so what works typically well is, you give them a base salary, but you're looking for the kicker, the incentives to really get to high levels of growth. That could be, payouts, bonuses. It could be equity, and so you need to look at compensation in a different way, because if it's just a regular salary, you'll get regular folks, and that will not give you the kicker. So this is I know a contentious issue, but it's something which boards need to think about. You might need a different incentive structure for this new business. I think we've mentioned the hands off a few times, and this is a delicate thing. Be involved, but not be too much involved, because you want them to experiment. You want them to and by the way, you also want them to quote unquote fail a few times in terms of mini mistakes, because it's only by making those mistakes and learning from those mistakes that they're going to get faster and faster. If everything is too good, if everything's perfect, I would question: are you pushing them enough? Are they experimenting enough? Are they growing fast enough? So that's something to also keep an eye on for a director. Focus on value. And the important thing is many of these business models are focused on long-term value, but you need to make sure it's a real value. I'm not a big fan of all these paper valuations. All this technology, etc., is great, but it has to result in value. And if you were to sell a company, you should be able to get real return from it. But the important thing is it takes time sometimes in these B2C businesses for you to get consumers, to get them engaged. And really that is the key metric. If you were to ask me what's the number one metric, what's the number of thing I track my new business about, is it downloads? No. Is it valuation? No. The number one thing is, are customers engaging and using this product or this experience? And are they coming back? Because engagement or usage is the real test that you've got something which is sticky. It's something that people want to use. Revenue will follow, profitability will follow only if you build a product that people want. I know it sounds obvious, but there's too many digital businesses that build stuff that isn't used, and they get excited about paper valuations, which don't really mean anything. Action. You want people which do and talk less. Okay, so you really want to make sure in every BOD, well, since the last BOD, can you guys just go through everything that you've done, and how have you thought about it strategically, but how have you actually executed, and if I was in a BOD and in, let's say there's a 3 quarterly meeting, and in the last quarter, for example, on the growth side, they've run 2 campaigns, I would think something's broken, in 3 months, you should have had, many different campaigns. You should have released the product multiple times. You should have hired multiple people, really push them to keep executing. And then, you work in a very different rhythm. And this word agile gets used and abused a lot, but it's test, learn is what you're looking for. And that's what agile is really about. And, they work in kind of typically 2-week sprints, just a fancy word for saying, break up the work into smaller bits and then keep focused on it for every 2 weeks. So these are lessons built for any digital business and for a BOD to kind of think about, is this what's happening in the company that I'm a director of? And then for the BODs themselves, if we go to the last page, these are some of the key things. Must understand sometimes it's difficult to understand in a highly technical new business, but try to understand in the simple, once again, the key question you want to ask is, can we, like any business, are we creating value for the user? And can we capture the value? It's as simple as that. Don't let the technology confuse you, but is whatever you guys doing creating real value? And can we capture that value? If yes, then we have a business. If not, then it's all talk. Okay. Number two, align all the different stakeholders. So it's always good to get different points of view, but we all need to be clear as a board. Is this something that's going to pay off in the short term or the long term? Are we convinced that this is the leadership team that can really pull this off? Because there will be competition. Any good idea will have competition. So can they pivot around the competition in the marketplace? And do they have the right mindset to kind of get us through this? And are they the right management team for this stage of growth? If you remember the 5 phases I went through, innovate, build, grow, then exit, you might need a different leadership, at different stages of the company. So that's something which the BOD has to bear in mind. Do we have the right leadership team to drive this? And then the final thing is stay engaged. As a BOD, use the product. That's the first thing I ask any board of directors. Before you come and review the leadership team and the business, have you touched the product? Have you downloaded the product? Have you used the product? Because you have to get hands-on like that. And then, provide the external experts to help your management team succeed. The BOD might not be all the experts you need for the management team. You might need external folks to come in occasionally. And I think the biggest thing that a BOD can do is use their skills and their network to provide the support to the leadership team, and the management team to actually do their best work. And so the BOD is a little bit more engaged as a user, and the BOD is engaged more as a network to make sure that the leadership team have the best expertise that they need. Yeah. I hope this was useful. Back to you, Kunkulovich.
Oh, wow. Many thanks, Kun Dilip. That was very eye-opening. So we talked about the lesson learned from the board's point of view. We talk about understand, and understand is to understand what value we create for the user, right? And
Yep.
early on, you talk about it's not about valuation, it's about value. It's not about paper valuation, it's about user value, the users perceiving the value from us, right? The second one, you said align. Align leads to trust too, right? So, but align is about culture, it's about mindset, it's about expectation from two different worlds. And lastly, engage. If the board need to understand, if they want to keep away but still engage, they need to use the product.
Yeah,
right.
Because in any digital business, the product becomes the face of what you're doing, and so it is absolutely. I mean, the biggest thing the board can do is become the face of the customer and be the voice of the customer in the boardroom, and that'll help you take a long-term view. That's the most important thing, in my humble opinion.
Okay, I have some question to either Kun Dilip or Kun Jan. So, what if this new project is so successful and kind of cannibalize the mothership? Has there ever been the case of that? So that is one extreme. The other extreme is that the project itself is bleeding so much, is that when to pull the plug. So I'm asking you two extremes. One is, could it be possible that the new project cannibalize the mothership, and what do we have to do with the mothership? The second one is, if the project is bleeding so much, when to pull the plug?
Yeah, so Kunjan, please also jump in as well. But from my point of view, when to pull the plug is very easy, in my opinion, and that is when that is when, and it's not, and it really comes down to when. If I go back to what I said earlier, when users are not using the product, if you're seeing people are not coming back, if you are seeing people are uninstalling, if you are seeing, people are not willing to pay for it, something is broken. So yes, you try and fix those things, because that's the whole point about agile. But if you cannot fix it, if customers are not sticking and using your product, okay, not willing to pay for the product, okay, then you've got something wrong. And so then you should pull the plug, okay, after trying to fix it. Because if no one's using the product, everything else doesn't matter. And then in terms of the first one, there are examples where, look, if I'm a traditional company and the startup becomes so great, and you, like you said, there are examples of this is happening in banking and with telcos at the moment, where you've got digital attacker and digital telcos, where the new digital company is actually growing faster. And there's even question: do we need the traditional setup? In that case, it's actually a positive, I feel, because you have a new kind of way of surviving for the future. And so as they say, it's better to disrupt yourself than to be disrupted by somebody else. And then the other extreme is there are examples where some traditional businesses may not exist even anymore, because there's new ways of doing things. But that's back to Kun Jan's first slide. Companies, companies don't survive forever. They come and go, yeah. And so in this new era, there might be some traditional companies whose time might be up, and there are some traditional companies who are able to disrupt themselves and find a new frontier for them to work on as well. Kunjan, do you want to say anything? Did I cover?
Yeah,
cover it?
I was thinking about the example that Kun Gulabet was asking, right? The one that disrupt yourself and then kind of, I guess you might not remember, but I think I heard somewhere they say Netflix, right? Originally, they used to be the content provider for Blockbuster. So they are like they try to go and approach, and then like their main business was make all these movies and content, and they work with Blockbuster, right? But then after a while, they were like, oh, okay, why don't I try to like have this new streaming service? And then so in a way, right now, like the only thing we know is like the Netflix, like that we look for the online streaming service, right? They no longer provided content to Blockbuster anymore because Blockbuster is not there. So in a way, you have like a backup options, right? That if you have your core capability and you know how to adapt to this new digital business building, over time, then you kind of evolve. And it's okay that even though you're not cannibalizing your own like kind of original companies, like with the Asian time, like the new business grow big enough, then it still support like the overall business, right? The second one is like when to pull the plug. In a way, I think that is really important, right? In the digital business, it's not like traditionally that you invest on something and you just kind of wait until it like die on its own, right? Because like the concept that Dilip mentioned earlier about this MVP, right? Minimum viable products. I think on the flip side, the change in consumer behavior or expectation is that even though you come up with like a great, there is no perfect product. There is nothing that would stop like kind of, oh, this is what I love already. Because even though you come up with a version, consumer these days expect you to improve on it over time. Like what is great today, if you don't move, it become not good because someone else come up with a better things, right? So when saying like when to pull the plug, I think it was like usually what I'm from Alibaba, right? So we say like the world changed in 6 months, right? So like every 3 months there would be a new feature, right? We test it, it doesn't work, we just pull it down, then we test another one. And it's actually a lot of products that you would get test, and you actually that is very important. We have to have this courage or like the decisiveness to just exit, because otherwise you have too many products on shelf. And usually for us, we test it within the 2-3 months. But when we say we exit, it doesn't mean you just give it up, right? But you build a new version or like launch a new feature to make sure that it works. But the previous feature that doesn't work, then you just exit and no need to maintain it. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Kunjan. Well, I like the last one. You just said that you have to have the courage also to make decisions. because otherwise you end up with so many things on your table. So we have learned a lot from today. Let me summarize, and if both of you would like to add, this is the final point. So we talk about the dilemma of the shorter lifespan of a company, and in order to address that, the company has to reinvent it all the time right now through digitalization. And through that, we say that there are quite a few ways to do that. And the three ways that was quite obvious to us is that firstly, do it yourself, okay, or incubate a smaller player or smaller startup, or do the venture capital, do the partner JV partner with others. So, and there are pros and cons of each one. For example, you said that the first one is the do-it-yourself. Usually, is the company that the culture is so different, and they want to create another company where the culture is so different from their own culture. For example, banking industry, right? And then we talked about what the board should learn about this, which is about I still like the idea of Dilip. At the end of the day, it's all about user and the value that we provide to the user, and that is more than the paper valuation. So the board has to understand if the company that the new company or the new venture or the new project that we are doing, is it providing value to the customers? And the board has to align mindset, expectation, and trust, and then to engage by using the product by themselves. And you have to allow the company to make the mistake, because making mistake is like investment. You just invest in the wisdom of doing the right thing better. Okay, so did I miss anything, or did you have anything else to say, Kun Dilip or Kun Jan?
No, I
Hello?
think you did you summarized it really well. So thank you for doing that. I think the just to give the BOD and the attendees a little bit of insight. There's a famous saying from Andy Grove of Intel many years ago. And my career started in kind of tech. And that is only the paranoid survive. And not to be overly negative, but I think it's a healthy way of looking at it. That don't ever rest in your laurels, because as
Okay.
Kun Jan said, users expect more. Number one, and technology will change. And so the old days of building a product, and then you build a moat around it, and then you just kind of cash in. I think for many industry that doesn't exist anymore. Every industry is being disrupted, and so the only way is to be a little paranoid, to say, okay, next quarter, what will be my goal, and what will be my competition's goal, and that'll keep you surviving and growing.
Yeah. So this one I can add, right? So my old company, Jack, always say that your best today is your minimum requirement tomorrow. So I think that's how like the tech world is behaving these days. So if we want to catch up, you need to have that mantra as well. So your best today is your minimum requirement for tomorrow.
So that means the first thing we have to hack is our own mindset and make it paranoid all the time. With that, I would like to end this wonderful session. We have learned a lot, and we would like to thank Kun Dilip and Kun Jan for this all this great knowledge. I'm sure this is not the last session with McKinsey. I would like to thank all of you, the audience who have listened, and thanks for your support to IOD. Thank you to our great sponsor, Bangja, K-Bank, and Patator PTT. And thanks to our technology partner, Cisco System Limited, for the WebEx. Our next activities is on Governance, Risk and Compliance Series, GRC Series, Episode 4. Which we have been doing with PwC. This episode the topic is connected and autonomous supply chain ecosystem 2025. Okay, so we are talking about 5 years from now, how supply chain is going to change, how ecosystem is going to change. It's all going to be on Thursday, the 17th of August. Sorry, not August. I mean for September, from 6 to 7. From 6 to 7. And meanwhile, thank you very much, everyone. Goodbye. สวัสดีครับ
ค่ะ